Hi, Joel here. Welcome to Module 6, Your Business is a Story. Today's module will be about receptivity, and the theme is the end of the snowball fight. Everybody gathers together, everybody tells his story, and the tool we'll be looking at is actually a continuation of the Eisenhower matrix that we saw at the very first module that lets us explore a sort of paradox known as the prisoner's dilemma. But let me start here. What is receptivity? It's the ability to hear what other people are saying or other circumstances are saying. It's the ability, therefore, to listen and also the ability to observe and then seize opportunities. So here's just an example from our story. The day is finished, the snowball fight is finished, and now we have 5 different accounts of the same day. Timmy thinks that he's the hero of the snowball fight because he stole the snowballs from the other camp's fort. Mark thinks he's the hero because he led the charge, the final charge. Rachel thinks it's all baby stuff and she has way more fun with building her robot. Dad remembers that were arguments about not having a fight, and then the park saying that they wouldn't have a fight anymore because there's too much. The more fights, the snowball fight there are, the more injuries there is. Therefore, they would cancel it, and that's when he went to the emergency. And so, as far as he knows, the snowball fight should have been canceled. And then, Timmy's mom, has this to say that it was wonderful that she had 4 hours all to herself. How do you reconcile those stories? Well, you have to listen. And that ability to listen is to be receptive. How do we fail to be receptive? Of the main 3 reasons, I would say greed, pride, and sloth. Greed, if you have an agenda and we're not willing to listen to people who have a different agenda or we think is an agenda that's contrary to what we want. That's one reason why we don't listen. The other one is pride, and it's sometimes mechanical. It could be, for instance, a student who thinks structurally. In math, typically that's an algebraist, who will see the general pattern first, and then he has to work out the details. And if, say, his teacher is an analyst that works from the tiny little details to the general picture, that teacher sometimes is upset that the student is able to get the big picture right off the bat, whereas he has been working on it for many years, hasn't seen it kind of gel. So he will hear what is being told to him, but he will not listen to it. That can lead to trouble. And the other one is sloth. There's a 1% rule that says that if you improve your performance by 1% every day, at the end of the year, you're pretty well. But the reason very often we refuse to make changes is because we say, well, yeah, but the way I do it works, and that will just improve it a little bit. There's no reason to. There's a saying, a story, not unlike the crow story, that finding a black cent in the street is lucky. Why not $100? Why not $1,000? Why a black cent? Well, because again, that story is not about the cents, it's about the person who picks up the cent, who has the courage to stoop down and pick up the cents. because if he's able to handle it, he or she is able to handle shame when the circumstances require it, that person is way more likely to take advantage of lucky breaks. What's my tetrad for receptivity? It enhances empathy and serendipity. It obsoletes prejudice and trial and error. It retrieves generosity and it reverses to dictatorship and chaos. Now you yourself will have a different tetrad, and that is actually important and useful. The rest of this module we're going to divide into three sections. The first one is going from the Eisenhower matrix to the prisoner's dilemma, and then we're going to look at how we have finite games, infinite games, and transgenerational games, and what does that mean in terms of the story we tell and how our strategy changes accordingly. I'll give you some real games to play, and now maybe it's time to address the elephant in the room. Why do people in workplace don't play? And there's many reasons to that. One is that, as it says, we're not paid to play. Although that is changing, I'm pretty sure. Often it's the fear of being revealed, is the fear of being read. And there's two things in there. First of all, especially in the younger generation, that when we take a job, we're supposed to solve the world and make it a better place, and we're supposed to be part of the team, and we are supposed to be full of enthusiasm for the mission. Well, sometimes, taking care of oneself and care of one's family is quite honorable. But we don't want to look as not team players. So that's one reason why people don't play. Another reason is, again, fear of exposure. If we hate someone at the workplace, or if we don't feel connected at all to the people at the workplace, and we don't want that to show up. Well, again, it's a matter of understanding that not everybody loves us, and not everybody should love us. And it does not mean that we cannot achieve great things together and good things together. So I'll give you a couple of card games, and then I'm going to go very reluctantly to Kumbaya, singing together. And then finally, um, I'll give you an additional bonus. I wanted to talk about coincidence matrices. They're very useful, they're very powerful. They're up and coming tools. They're used in ecology, they're used in analyzing your competition. There's some software for that that's coming out. It would be too far, so I'm going to talk to you about coincidence graph or resources graphs, as they're called. It's a way to understand competition from a graphical perspective. It's equivalent, but it's easier to present. And I'll give it to you as a bonus after we say goodbye. So let's get started. Here's an Eisenhower matrix, the type that we saw in Module 1 when Timmy got up and saw all the snow in the beautiful sun and said, I'm going out, this is the most important thing in my day. And mom came and says, well, you decide what's important for you, but I decide what's urgent. And you need to take your breakfast, brush your teeth, and make your bed before you can go outside. So we have the same kind of matrix here, urgent, not urgent, important, not important. The difference is that there's cost associated with each box. The top left box for urgent and important, if there's a task in there that we don't perform during the day, then that costs us $2 to clients, 2 units of resources. And so we can actually build a strategy that when tasks are put into the table, we know which one to pick up first to minimize the cost of performing those tasks. And we're going to look at it, the same kind of table, but from a different problem known as the prisoner's dilemma. Let me show you. Here's the prisoner's dilemma matrix. The same as we saw in the previous example, the Eisenhower matrix. Now with the cause and the players are different. The players are 2 burglars that have been caught by the police running away from a house. From the evidence, the police officer know that they can charge them with a crime that's worth a year in prison. But they suspect something more. So they want to try to get Luke to snitch over John. This is an economics problem, it's not a moral problem. Be very aware of that. If Luke's one of the burglars or suspected burglars snitches on John, John will get 3 years in prison. If John snitches on Luke, Luke will get 3 years in prison. But here's the details. If John snitches on Luke and Luke does not snitch on John, John will walk free and Luke will have 3 years. So that's the upper right box in the table, the one with the 0. If, on the other hand, John doesn't snitch on Luke and Luke doesn't snitch on John, they both get 1 year. So here's the catch. Depending on the context, John and Luke have different optimal strategies. Again, this is an economics problem, it's not a moral problem. If John and Luke met by accident and John doesn't know Luke and doesn't trust Luke, then he may assume that he has a 50-50 chance that Luke will snitch on him. In that case, his average jail sentence, John's average jail sentence is 3 years in half of the case and 0 years in half of the case. So by snitching on Luke, his average sentence, his expected sentence is 1.5 years. If John collaborates with Luke, whom he does not trust, there's a 50-50 chance that he'll do 3 years, and a 50-50 chance that he'll do 1 year. So on average, he'll do 2 years, which is much more than, 6 months more than if he snitches on Luke. So in that context, from a purely economic perspective, John has the advantage as an advantage to snitch on Luke. And that's for a one-time game. The situation changes if John and Luke are real partners, they're good buddies, and they trust each other, or at least they get to learn to trust each other. Then the 50-50 chances might become 20-80, even 0% chances of
snitching and 100% chances of not snitching, then the situation changes because then they get a better off. They're better off collaborating. And so the optimal strategy in this case, playing over and over and over again and refining their game to actually reduce their sentences, is tit for tat. You start by being generous, and then you respond as the other one responded last time. So if Luke's snitches on John the first time, the second time around, John's going to snitch on Luke. So we have already two kinds of strategies. One is for the one-time game. The other one is for the so-called infinite game. And then there's a transgenerational game that we play in machine learning, where sometimes you introduce a new partner. And in this case, what's happening is that if you let the game play for over and over and again, it has been observed that the populations get cyclically very altruistic and very greedy, and then very generous, and then very greedy, and then very generous and very greedy, which is not the way to accumulate free time. The better approach that has been found so far is to play tit for tat, but from time to time to be generous with somebody who has been mean in the past.
Time to conclude. The last example of the prisoner's dilemma showed that depending on how we play the game, we have different strategies. To be receptive means that we can focus decidedly on other people. So there's two elements to this: switching focus, and the other one is paying attention to other people. And this game here, this card game, you can find similar one on lumosity.com, and I'll put the link there in the resource section. But this is a game for switching attention. You take one 52 card deck and you remove all the aces, the jokers, shuffle the cards, and then you'll pick them, flip them visible from invisible to visible, one after the other, and you must follow some rules which are given by the table that you see on the screen. So the cards from 2 to 10 are numbered 2 to 10. The Jack, the J, is 11, the Queen 12, and the King 13. That's why we have an equal number of even and odd numbers. If the card that's revealed is red, you say it's parity. So if it's an even card, like a 10 or an 8, you say even. If it's an odd card, like a 3, you say odd. Now, if the card that you flip is black, when the card is even, you say red, and when the card is odd, you say black. And now, each time a player makes the right move, he wins 1 point. Whenever the player plays the wrong move, that player loses 1 point. If you play alone, then you put a timer, so you have some pressure. And if you play at 2 or 3, then the first one to call is the one who loses or wins the point. The ballot is a great card game to promote receptivity because it combines reasoning with emotions. It is played 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2. Ballot is similar to contract bridge. The difference is that all players hold and play their cards. We have this additional requirement that nobody should signal anyone their cards. Obviously for the opponents, but also your partner in the game. So you must be able to show self-restraint, not to be accused of signaling to your partner. And on the other hand, you must keep an eye on your opponents to make sure that they're not signaling each other which card they hold. And then you must reason to know which cards have been played and which cards are still held and when they might be put on the game. I'd like to offer you a last exercise to help with receptivity. May actually be the hardest one of all the all the games we talked about. You've seen in companies people will play ping pong, they will sometimes go and play racquetball together or tennis. These are all performance sports. They're way to size, competitiveness, there's focus of the person. Now I'm going to make an exception. I'm going to go kumbaya on you here. But there's actually medical reason for doing that. You've seen people pick up a guitar and play, pick up an harmonica and play. Now that person is actually taking leadership because they're stepping out of their box and they're actually doing something that's good for everyone. I'd like to offer to propose to you, not just offer, to propose to you to go one step further. And that's part of the fiddler's culture. Is at the end of the day, at the end of a difficult period, people would form a circle and they would sing together. It's not just some archaic practice, it's actually documented and has been explained by recent medical studies, psychological studies, and I'll put the links in the resource section. Singing together will open paths of understanding. It helps alleviates aggression. It also helps with synchronization and it actually feeds the brain in ways that reading does not. And so I'd like you to try, and it takes a little bit of courage to do that, to sit down with people. It could be on Zoom. It's better if it's in person, but it could be on Zoom. And sing a song that you both know, not a song that's being played by some device, not some canned music, but music that you create yourself. You can vary the tempo like way you want. You'll probably start singing out of tune, which is what takes a little bit of courage. And you probably will sing out of step, but strangely enough, after if you try, the music gets better, and sometimes it gets really, really, really good. So that's my last game for you. The open question. If you were in the webinar, you heard about the story of my going around the United States asking people the question, what is kindness? Or the question, what's the evolutionary purpose of joy? That's a standard method. It goes back thousands of years ago. It's common among business people. We go around and we say, how do I make money with this? How do I make money with that? Can I make money here? Can I make money there? How much would that sell where I come from? But it doesn't have to be, as I said, business questions. And so here's a question I'd like to offer to you is when you meet someone, ask yourself what is his or her question. Business has been shut for a long time, a year, and whatever example you set is likely to be passed on to further generations because this kind of situation will not happen again for a long time. So cherish those times, use them to build yourself, build your legacy, which is not just material but also personal. And if you have, on the other side, if you do have in your families examples, stories, like a lot of Americans here, well, not a lot, but some Americans here have stories that goes back to the Mayflower, others to the War of Independence. Some people of Europe have very long stories, very old stories. People in Asia and Africa, even longer stories. I would ask you respectfully to live those stories for your own benefit and for the benefit of other people. Don't necessarily share them because, again, they don't necessarily mean something to other people, but they mean in the example that you set using those histories. Enough of that. Yes, why am I in this thing here? I told you I want to understand why is it that some teams are able to send an egg carton to Mars and send it and land it safely? Why is it that some businesses can exist for 1500 years? There's some in Japan, there's some in Jerusalem, there's some in Europe, there's maybe some in Africa, I'm not sure about that, but I'd love to know about them. I'd love to understand what is the basic concept, what are the values, what are the attitude, mindsets that enable that kind of long-term business. And so you're welcome to follow me as I learn more things. I will share them with you. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best. Take care. Bye. Before we finish this course, I'd like to show you one last tool, which is an extension of a tool that I showed you in Module 1, where we had Timmy and Mark wanting to play on the same team, and the two coaches, Greens and HBR, could not agree on how to put forward the best players. So here we have the same field, same snow field, with the 7 players which are not labeled. You have Jeff near the 1 in 800 on the vertical line, and below Jeff is Mark, and then Lawrence, and then Jensen, and to the right of Jensen is Pablo, and to his right is Jack, and the very right side is Timmy. All those players are competing with each other, each pushing the envelope in some way. Now, can we learn something about the dynamics of competition in this team? Well, actually, it turns out yes, much more than if we had a linear rank. Here's the story. You see the six diamonds, red diamonds. They're labeled Bernard, Martin, Joan, Anders, Ignacio, Jean-Paul. These are players that might become first pick if Jack or Timmy were already picked up. Let me explain. If Jack is removed from the selection, then all those 6 players are the next ones that would be entered, that would enter the selection ring. Now, none of them would, because, for instance, Pablo has on the left of Jacques has a lower green score than, say, Bernard or Martin, and so there's no advantage in having
in looking at Bernard or Martin as long as Pablo is still in the competition. Joan and Anders would immediately join the competition. And then there's also Ignacio and Jean-Paul. Well, they're also, see, they're jointly in competition for Jacques and Timmy's place. The way to look at it is that Jake is taking the customers of Bernard, Martin, Joan, Anders, Ignacio, and Jean-Paul. If somebody would like, if there are businesses and somebody would like to come to Bernard's just on top of Jacques business, well, you would have a better score. Jacques would have a better HBR score and green score than Bernard, therefore they would go to Bernard. So in a sense, Jake consumes Bernard. And Jake consumes Ignacio and Jean-Paul. And so does Timmy. So in the resource graph, we link Jake and Timmy together because they have some resources in common. And that gives a structure to the competition field. Well, let me show you now what the graphs look like for this particular example. These particular 7 top players. And you see that Jensen and Pablo are pretty much on their own. They don't compete with anybody else. Tim and Jack basically have in common Ignacio and Jean-Paul. And those two, Ignacio and Jean-Paul, would try to take their place. Mark, Jeff, and Lawrence have under the 2 sets of players in common, Paul and Bobby. What does that look like? See that Jeff and Mark on the top left corner, and Paul and Bobby have pretty low HBR ranks, so they'll be interesting for HBR. Though they have a bit higher green score, they're going to be less interesting to Greece, but they would be the next one to get into the competition. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed.